Is it just me, or do I see a lot more elderly people working entry level jobs now? Well, according to this one article I read by HR Dive, that I found pretty interesting, jobs that told it told me that 79% of hiring managers have seen an increase in older applicants for entry level jobs. Well, that doesn't sound like anything that would significantly impact the current job market. But what is also interesting is that 60% of these hiring managers actually prefer elderly applicants opposed to teenage ones, which does make sense. I mean, I have seen a lot of younger workers that definitely don't do their job as well as their older coworkers, which is how it should be. After all, they have more experience and more likely than not know how to do that job. Although this is good for the hiring managers and the companies these managers belong to, this is not good for a much larger group, the teenagers that aren't able to get these jobs. After all, a lot of teenagers and younger people learn important skills from their first job, such as learning how to manage their time effectively or how to manage or be a leader to other people, which should be taught in schools, but the vast majority of teenagers in schools don't take it too seriously. And while it would be nicer if their parents could teach them, that's more likely than not going to happen. So these entry level jobs that would normally teach all these kids how to actually be functioning members of society are now not going to hire them because they have much better workers available to them at a much lower cost, which is actually fantastic for these companies right now, but not really in the long run. Since whenever these teenagers turn to other ways of making income that could possibly be illegal, or they learn a very important skill, they won't want to do those entry level jobs since they'll be in a position where they can't do the job. They're too qualified and already make a lot more money, or they'll be in another part of the world doing work that actually hired them, and they're climbing the ranks and doing well, such as in jobs that are very labor intensive. Then those companies won't have another generation of elderly people to work those entry level jobs for them. And the new generation of teenagers that are born are taught to do the jobs that their parents did, and those companies will be out of luck. Or at least I guess they'd have a hard time hiring people. But is it the fault of the elderly people? Not at all. Since the reason these elderly people are needing jobs is because they have no money to be able to stay in retirement. I'm sure you've heard the word pension at least once in your life. And what a pension actually does, it basically supplies money uh, to a person in retirement. So it's a fund that is paid into by someone's employer when that person worked for that employee, and that pension is invested and it grows into a large sum of money. And then once that employee is in retirement, all that money is given to that employee in regular payments. Long story short, a lot of those pensions failed, and that's one reason elderly people had to go back to work, which was a huge issue and it sucks. But another reason is good old inflation, not the Overwatch Tracer kind of inflation, but the government is printing too much money and is making everything more expensive because of it kind of inflation. Long story short, is whenever Long story short, inflation is whenever, let's say, a GamerSubs cup costs $30, then over a course of, let's say, 5 years, it now costs $35. It's the exact same cup, and you are buying it directly from the gamersubs.gg website, but the actual worth of $30 back then is now worth $35. This is because there is now more money, and since there is more, one, and since there is more, 1 unit of this money is now worth less because it is more common. Think about if there were 1,000 more PSA 10 Charizards, the price of a PSA 10 Charizard would be less. Inflation is pretty much that. Anyways, because of inflation, the amount of money these elderly people have saved for their retirement is now not nearly enough to pay for the bare necessities, which is the government's fault. Another thing that is also kind of the government's fault is Social Security. Social Security is pretty much the same thing as a pension, but it's much more safe than a pension because it is backed by the government, but there is one major difference which I will get to later. Anyways, because of the amount of people drawing out social money from Social Security and the cost of everything getting more expensive, the regular Social Security paycheck isn't enough to pay rent. There's no real way to fix this since the government will keep printing more money. There's really no doubt about that. And the major difference that I was talking about is that instead of your employer paying into it, you pay into it in a form of a cut from your paycheck. So if you want more in your pension, you get less in your paycheck, and that won't work since if you pay so much now, you can't afford stuff now. If you don't pay enough now, you'll be able to afford now, but you can't afford later. So, long story short, you're screwed. The only real way to solve this whole issue is for the government to stop printing so much money and deal with how much inflation is affecting the US. But in the short term, you can always pick up a side hustle mowing lawns or cleaning gutters to invest into your retirement, if you're a teenager at least, and can't get a job. Then going into one of the branches of military and using the GI Bill, VIA loan, and all of the other benefits to help secure your future. But let's just hope something changes soon and everything returns to 16-year-olds working the cashier and 60-year-olds gardening and fishing to their heart's content. Yeah. So, long story short, inflation fucking sucks. The government needs to do their job right, and let us hope that whoever our new president is doesn't fuck shit up. And yeah, that's all.